What's up, Doc?
Hey,
Hey, man. Fall season.
Fall 22, episode 1. There we go.
We got some coordination going on.
Yeah. You see, you got to teach me harmony now. You're the worship guy. So if we're going to say the same things, I got to say it a little different tone.
You got to do a third up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, look, man. Hey, sermon was powerful. One of my daughters on the way home said, "Man, Dad, wasn't that a powerful message?" I said, "Yeah, it was."
Tell Annika I said thanks.
I will tell Annika just that. But I asked Annika. So what were your takeaways?
Oh.
And she said to me, because of some of the things that she's going through, trying to look pretty, wanting to fit into the crowd, that she felt after hearing the sermon, she needed to rearrange some things or reprioritize.
Wow. Praise God.
Things. So I thought, I love it. I love my brother, but I've been telling you this for weeks and weeks and months, and it takes one brother to say one thing.
Oh, yeah. Oh, we felt that. I can't believe how many times my kids have come home and said, "Ben said," and they're so blown away by the profound thing that Ben said that I've been saying for 15 years. And it's like, hey, we need that. We need different sources. We need different voices. So
that's how the Lord works, brother.
Oh,
yeah. So
cool. Praise God. That's a great testimony.
Yeah. So I know you got some questions that came in. I got a couple of questions that I thought on the fly, man. I remember when I was at a Harbor Network conference, you were there, but I think I was sitting with somebody else, and they were telling me what I'm wanting to get to is Paul, like, seems like he's bouncing from crowd to crowd to crowd. And you pressed into that a little bit, but this guy said, "Man, I will go to LBGTQ art forums or like little talks or concerts to show my support."
Yeah.
And right then and there, I thought, I didn't say anything because I was kind of afraid to.
Yeah.
But I thought, dude, like, I would never do that. I don't want them to think that I'm okay with that lifestyle.
Yeah.
You know, after hearing your sermon and after meditating on this a little bit, I don't know. I wonder if I was wrong. And I didn't prep you with that question at all.
Yeah.
But his thing is he's there to answer any questions. He's there to be there to evangelize without like slamming them down with the Bible or where they're wrong. But he wanted to make himself available to them. I don't know what's your...
Yeah. No, I think that's, part of this. One of the things I had kind of texting back and forth with somebody about it is kind of the difficult thing of we are geared, because in some ways it would just be easier. We are geared toward like, can I have a chart that tells me when it would be appropriate to lay down my rights, when it would be appropriate to pick them back up, when laying down my rights has a greater evangelistic effort, and when maintaining my convictions, holding to that would have a greater, and it's like, man, it just doesn't work as a chart. It really doesn't. I think, where the rubber meets the road there is like, you can, in the same way, and I think this is just where we transfer things over. Like I heard a guy talking the other day, got himself in trouble because he said he just spoke up way too bluntly, but he said he was in a meeting where somebody talked about how the friends of theirs was going to get married, but the church didn't allow alcohol at the church. And he was like, well, that's stupid, which I was thinking, well, I think we actually have that policy for weddings at our church too right now, and he goes, the couple had been living together for years and then they got married, but the one thing the church did outlaw was, and it was like, oh yeah, like a wedding under certain conditions could be looking to endorse those situations. So like, I think, an art gallery, a concert or something, it doesn't mean you're affirming their lifestyle. It means you're just coming to support them. A supposedly Christian wedding or a baptism at a church where they're holding to things that you're like, man, this is in direct conflict with the gospel. And I think my participation would send a wrong message about the gospel. I think those are different scenarios you have to walk through. But I think a lot of those, it's really, man, there's a fine line between supporting a person and seeking to encourage and love a person and enabling what their sinful actions might be. And I think that's a really hard one. Look, like, here's the reality of it. I was telling somebody else this week, it was hard to preach this sermon where Paul keeps saying, look, y'all, I'm not receiving a dime from you because I want the gospel to be pure. And to stand up in front of a church where I'm going, look, y'all, I receive money from you. Does that mean I'm not as passionate about the gospel being pure? And having to really do the work of going, no. Earlier in the chapter, Paul's been making the point, this is a right and you should be doing it. Support. He says the same thing in 1 Timothy that, and I think you see that in context. Like sometimes you go to a pastor's meeting, this is letting you guys all behind the curtain that you don't care about, but you go to pastor's meetings and sometimes there's guys that'll look down on bivocational pastors because they feel like, well, they haven't just stepped all the way into it, trusted the church to support them, not cared for their own, and they'll kind of look down on it as their JV. I've been in other environments where like I'm the only full-time pastor and other guys are bivocational. And they look at me kind of like, well, you're the sellout. You're living the easy life. You're sitting in your office studying while I'm making widgets and doing that in the evening.
Easy street, man.
Yeah, And so what's that come down to? Like some of it's personal conviction, some of it's context that has to drive those things. And so I think, and then I think if we're going to do that well, we can't, this is why, again, we need the body of Christ. Because if I'm left to myself to try and sort out my heart motivation, sort out how it's being received by other people, sort out what my applications and possible outcomes could be, I'm knowing myself, I'm just going to spiral inward and get really down. So it's like, you got to have other people in your life that you can say, hey, evaluate this. Do you think I'm crossing a line in what it looks like I'm supporting? Do you think I'm compromising? Sure. Do you think I'm planting my foot too hard? Right. Do you think I'm selling out? Do you think I'm being inflexible? We need each other for that. To walk through it. I gotta assume, he doesn't say in the passage, but I gotta assume Paul's run it by Timothy and Barnabas and these other guys and said, like, am I nuts to not take money? But I will say, I think he did the right thing for his situation, because when you get to 2 Corinthians, he's got to make that appeal all over again because they've been pulled away from the truth of the gospel.
Gotcha. Thank you for that, brother. So what you got, man?
You're supposed to ask a longer question while I was drinking. Oh, my goodness. Went to take a sip and you just fired it right back to
I messed up the podcast code. I got one if you want.
Well, if you got another one, you go there too.
I do, because like you had a lot of good things to say, but like my Christian walk, like I know I need to be more disciplined. I know I need to have more self-control over certain things, but like, and maybe you can give me some practical application on like, what can I do to like buffet my body, to box myself into submission? Give me some practical application that maybe you've done. I don't know.
Or not done.
But we should do. We should do, because Paul obviously mentions it in the dude. We all got issues. We all got problems, but the dude is buffet. Like he is doing the work, right, to keep himself in line with the gospel and doing what he's supposed to. What can I be doing?
Yeah. Well, it's funny you ask that, because I mean, honestly, I think literally part of that is like our physical self-care. I don't think that's the totality of it when he's talking about beating his body, disciplining his body. But I think that's a part of it. And you asked me on a week that's probably been, probably one of the most stressful weeks of my life. And what I do when I'm stressed is I eat. So I'm getting up and preaching a sermon about discipline and thinking I've had very little and need, and not just to passively dismiss that, but also seek the grace of God in the middle of it. I know you're, we won't go into details on it, but you're taking some discipline and some action there. I'm proud of for you. And I think, part of, especially in the physical realm, that one gets difficult because we can go one of two routes. We can become completely Gnostic and like ignore our bodies. I don't need to get sleep. I'm doing so much ministry. I'll sleep when I'm dead. I've heard pastors say that, and they think that's just such a great calling. The way we eat, exercise, handle stress, all of those. We can go Gnostic where we just ignore it and act like it doesn't matter. Or we can go the other way, where you and I think the standard is we got to look like the dudes on a magazine cover. And that's not the picture of health. That might be the picture of obsession in a different direction.
Right.
Or we just may not have body types that match up to that, right? Or different people, like you can't legislate. Everyone must get 8 hours of sleep. Some people need 10. Some people can get by on 6. Like, so I think we've got to be, we got to extend grace there and not go to a new law. But I think those are the, from my life, I have just found if discipline goes out in one area, discipline goes out in a lot of areas. So it's not consequential. I don't know. It's chicken or the egg a lot of times. But if I'm struggling to actually get some exercise and get up at a good time, I'm also struggling to get in the word. I'm struggling to be real disciplined in my prayer life.
Yes.
Some of those things. And so some of them are, I think, start early, like with easy ones, like, okay, maybe pick a once a week one. You're struggling with discipline in your life, which also means struggling to come to church. Come to church on Sundays and start with that one. And then, man, if you're not praying, I'm going to pray 15 minutes a day every morning before, my feet hit the floor. Like maybe not, maybe it just starts with even a sentence prayer to God before your feet hit the floor, reminding you there. And then you'll see yourself praying more. Yeah. There's a book we did one time accompanied with, I can't remember the other book that it was accompanied with, but there's a book called Your Future Self Will Thank You that is written by a Christian author about like kind of good habit forming and how we can form habits in a positive direction and not just a bad. That's a helpful resource. Okay. If somebody's looking for something with that.
What's the name of that again?
Your Future Self Will Thank You.
Your Future Self Will Thank You. Okay.
And then I think the other is just like, being willing to place our satisfaction. Like we live in such a hedonistic society. If it feels good, do it. If what's going to be the best thing for you in the moment, that we probably need to just rewind from that. And it's really just a change in thinking, if we can, of like, what does God say is best? So it's not even selling out of like, what would be best or what does God want? But it's actually a redirection of our thinking of what does God say is best? And that'd be best. A silly one with food. Like when I'm completely undisciplined in my eating, food doesn't taste as good. But when I like start showing some restraint and maybe don't even eat some of the things I'd like to eat, but pull back, flavors are more powerful.
Even a pickle tastes good.
No. But there are things that do. So, I got to correct you when you're wrong. But I think that's an example. And so moderation there doesn't feel good, we think, but actually we see it's best. Like, wow, I actually enjoy it more. It's greater blessing. Yeah. So
thank you for that, man.
I think the two that I had, and you can help walk through with these two. One was, man, I don't know why this didn't come out in the sermon. It would have fit perfectly. I had it in my notes before I was writing my sermon notes. So I was going to kind of address this. We have a lot of people in our body. Maybe you can think of other examples of what this would look like, but we've got people in the church who, come from a background where they were expected to wear a uniform. Women wore certain types of clothing. Men had to wear other types of clothing, and you never crossed over that. Women didn't wear pants, certainly didn't wear shorts, things like that. And after coming out of that environment, with people that are saying, okay, I go to the scriptures and I don't see that regulation. And so they're still pursuing modesty, which I think is the biblical norm, but they're practicing it in different ways. And then they say, but what do I do when I'm going to be around my family and they still expect the old ways? And I've had conversations with people before of like, am I being a hypocrite? Am I being two-faced, that I dress one way around some people and I dress another way around other people? And I would say, I don't think so at all. Yeah. I think that's actually an application of 1 Corinthians 9. That's an example of like, do you have a right to wear pants if you're a woman around some people that wouldn't want you to? Absolutely. But would it make the most sense? Is it the most loving thing? Would they hear a word that came out of your mouth, or would they only focus on what you're wearing? And so I think, it's a very similar example years ago when I went down to the Dominican. If you were preaching, the expectation at a minimum was like wearing khakis and a button-up shirt and probably a tie, depending on how hot it was. And I remember talking to the guy who was kind of running the ministry down there and was like, why? Like, why that standard? And he even said, oh, there's no biblical basis for that. And I would love to sway that, but you're not going to sway people from it if you show up not doing it. Like you show up in flip-flops, shorts, and a t-shirt and go, hey, I should be allowed to share in this.
Yeah.
They're not going to hear the word. You're going to sound like the teacher in Peanuts, and they're not even going to hear what it is you're saying. So you've got to be willing to recognize the greater purpose.
Oh, that's so hard, because you want them to experience freedom, because you feel free to do all things, right? All things. What's the verse? All things are
permissible, but not all things are beneficial.
Right. Yeah. Right. So you want them to experience this freedom that you found. Yeah. But it doesn't always get you intimacy with your brothers or sisters, especially when you're trying to show them Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah. Huh. We're going to get to that one. That one seems to be even a quote of the Corinthians that Paul's kind of turned back to them, that the issue is like, it may be permissible, but yeah, it's not beneficial. And it, again, would be better to lay down your right, which leads to the other side. So like, there's some that are like, no, I'm holding to everything because that's part of my identity and who I am. And they're missing the bigger cause. The further end of it is, I did have somebody ask me, like, kind of to that idea, how do you know? I mean, do we lay down our rights on everything? And does that not just turn us into a doormat that people can walk on or abuse?
That's a good question.
It is a great question. Yeah. And I think, we got to keep it in the realm of where Paul kept it. He's not talking about that kind of thing. As abusive as it might seem for me to not get to eat bacon in front of somebody who doesn't eat it and what they're depriving me of, I'll make up for it later, right? I'm not actually suffering injustice or harm or abuse. I think Paul puts it, I'll give you an example of even like with that. I talked to one of the members of the safety team one time when we had sort of an awkward situation that came up, and said to him, like, dude, don't take anybody out if they come after me. I know where I'm going. My family will be taken care of. I got life insurance. Like, they would die and potentially go to hell. They take me out. I'm absent with the body is present with the Lord. Like, I'll be in glory. I'll be all right. And the person I was talking to said, I understand your perspective, but you got to remember, in the midst of that situation, other people could get harmed and they may be just as lost. And came not seeking to hurt you or do something, but came seeking Christ. And now this has interrupted that. That was like, oh yeah, I'm thinking about only my scenario, but I'm not thinking about how it like filters out to others and the ripple effect. So I don't think this passage is saying we have to be abused. We have to, and I think here's the beauty too of like, especially we talk a little bit about culture. And like, what if the culture is going a different way? And how much do we fight that? In light of a couple of weeks ago, I was talking about the culture wars and that I don't see a biblical basis for those. That's another case where like the church is that embassy. That church is that kingdom within a bigger kingdom, that we represent something else. Like, even if injustices were happening out in the world, the church should be the place to come into where it's not. And so we may see the day coming where Christians are treated unfairly because of our perspectives on morality or exclusivity of Jesus or whatever it might be. And there might not be much we can do about that. I'm not comfortable saying our brothers and sisters around the world who are suffering persecution from even their government were wrong. Like, they should have fought sooner. They should have done something different. I'm not, I mean, because you read in Revelation, when Jesus writes to the churches, several of those churches were suffering persecution, and he does not rebuke them for that. He rebukes them for the way maybe they're handling it. But that shouldn't come into here. So if there's people being looked down upon, persecuted, facing injustice because of Christian standards out in the world, this is where we become that safe place to come together and embrace each other, support each other, care for each other. And so I think that's why Paul could lay down a right within the church, was for the sake of the proclamation to the church. But you'll see him in another place. We talk about like he gets persecuted by the government, and then he appeals to his Roman citizenship. Right. So there's him picking up a right, but he's not just doing it for himself. I think we talked about this in a previous pod. It got him to Jerusalem on Rome's bill, and it also protect that community, because it's like, hey, you guys went out of order, and you can't just go around thumping around Christians because they refuse to worship your God. if they're Roman citizens, they have rights,
Mhm.
and you need to understand those rights. So he was even like protecting the church
Sure.
in the midst of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you for that, brother.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Well, we're gonna leave on that note,
All right.
and we just want to make sure that life groups are going good. Ours started up last week, and it was
Yeah.
just so good to meet.
Good to get back
again.
together. Yes.
So remember, get in there. You guys got questions? We got a few rolling in. We would love a few more. So, hey, life group leaders, if you have any questions that people on your team, people on your group are asking, write those down. Send it to us, please, at 937-404-1207, so that we can discuss it.
Yeah. And I would say after Sundays, I mean, like I say, our goal is not to answer the questions, not even necessarily in life group. Like, it's really to just talk about how the text is impacting us, but it's also definitely not the goal of the sermon. And so if there's one that, did chew at you all week though, and then you come out on the other side of the sermon and go, yeah, I don't know, but that's still bothering me. Text it in. And
yes.
This is the kind of environment where we could say, what'd you get for number 3?
Right.
And we could say, well, this is what we're looking for. So yeah, this is supposed to aid and supplement, not replace anything.
That's right. Yep. All right. Hey, we love you guys so much. We can't wait to worship with you guys on Sunday. And remember that Christ has done all the work.
We're just driving home.
Peace.